Okay, so in this video, we're going to be talking about whether or not the UFC is going to be moving forward and going woke. And if you watch Sean Strickland's career closely, you will be able to see whether or not the UFC are going to go woke in the future, okay? That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because Sean Strickland has become such a massive superstar. I don't think we've seen anything like this since Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, okay? I'm gonna show you guys a video of how the fans reacted to Sean Strickland, just seeing him in the lobby around Canada, okay? This isn't a homecoming, like this isn't Dricus du Plessis going back to South Africa. This isn't Israel Adesanya going back to Nigeria or Francis Ngannou going back home. This is just Sean Strickland in Canada. These aren't even his native fans. And look at the way that they react.
I got you, bro.
Cheers, man.
Thank you.
Now, I totally understand that this is just one example, but when you look at the overall interactions of the entire weekend, the amount of views that his press conference got, the amount of tweets that were shared, Sean Strickland has the amount of eyes that he is bringing to the UFC is like a level that Nate Diaz would bring to the UFC, especially after that Conor McGregor fight. I spoke about this a little bit in my post UFC 297 video, but it's just showing that the more that Sean Strickland puts out there about the fight with the headbutt and everything, his fame is just growing and growing, and his notoriety is growing, and like whether or not he was robbed or he wasn't, that whole conversation is just adding to it. And it's having that effect. He's having that level of celebrity where everything he says is getting attention. Number one, because you never know what he's going to say next. And number two, because he lost, but he looks like a winner in the eyes of the fans. And same thing happened to him with that fight against Jared Cannonier. And then when you go ahead and look at the Alex Pereira fight, he lost that because he marched into a kickboxer with his chin up. Like, it just looks hardcore. And he is now entering that stage where it does not matter if he loses. The fans still love him. Plus, you add that with all the media attention of what is he going to say next. And Sean Strickland is turning into an absolute juggernaut for the UFC, which puts a dilemma right at the UFC, and that's why we're going to draw it to the UFC moving forward. Now, for as much posturing as Dana White did at the UFC press conferences, and Dana himself did a great job at the UFC press conferences addressing all the things that Sean Strickland said. He handled it absolutely perfectly, but Dana will not be there forever. Dana might not be there in another 5 years. If you've been following what's been happening in court with the UFC, the documents have come out that the parent company of the UFC, TKO, do have a succession plan for Dana White. Now, that could be nothing. Like, if you're a smart businessman and running a company properly, of course you have a succession plan for someone that's been in the position for 25 years. It would be ridiculous not to. But what's going to happen to such a massive company when Dana White steps away? And when you look at how the UFC has been behaving lately, right? After Sean Strickland's first press conference, or like on the media day, the very first media day when Sean Strickland was going ahead and facing the media, he kept turning to someone on the corner and asking them if what he was saying was okay, if he was going too far. That was a UFC handler that was there to make sure that Sean Strickland didn't step over the line. So you've got Dana White, who's perfectly okay with everything that Sean Strickland is saying, but you have the marketing team of the UFC right there, just off camera of Sean Strickland, making sure that he doesn't go too far over the line. And then after Sean Strickland went on his rant at that reporter who was asking him ridiculous questions, the UFC came out afterwards and apologized to the press conference, to all the media members there. The UFC did that. Then you go ahead and look at the Bud Light deal that the UFC has done. You go ahead and look at Pride Month, where UFC put rainbows on the shorts. And of course, UFC is working very closely with Disney. ESPN is the distribution company that handles every bit of content that the UFC puts out there. So you have Dana White that is holding back the floodgates, but everything that is happening in the background, if you're paying attention, is shifting in the direction of the message. So this is where you have to start watching it closely, because now you have a real dilemma for the UFC, a real clash, right? The UFC have got these superstars that they try and manufacture. That is essentially the UFC's business model, is to create superstars and then put them on a pay-per-view at least once a quarter. And they've done that with Sean O'Malley. You can see how tentatively they handled his career to get him to a title shot and then turned around their champion of Aljamain Sterling within 6 weeks. You can see that with Israel Adesanya, how every close decision seems to go his way, and when there's a boring pay-per-view of his, say Israel Adesanya versus Marvin Vettori, they will put their biggest star on the roster, Nate Diaz, on the undercard. They are very, very good at picking markets and making sure that that market has a face. They saw the Irish market with Conor McGregor. They don't want to lose that market. And they literally said, we know how to build an Irish star when it comes to Ian Gary. Now that's failed miserably. I'm sure they'll readjust. But my point is, the UFC manufactures stars, and they have been handed on a plate an absolute powerhouse of a star, Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland is the biggest star in the UFC today, but you can't put his face on a video game. You can't run his press conferences on ESPN. I don't have a problem with Sean Strickland at all. I think he's a legend, mate. But the marketing company of the UFC cannot take Sean Strickland and put him on a video game. They cannot play his press conferences around the world. He cannot be in line with Disney. So when you look at Sean Strickland's next fight going forward, you're going to be able to see whether or not the real powers that be in the UFC want to help promote and grow this money maker that is Sean Strickland, or whether or not they want to rush him back to the apex as quick as possible. MMA fans all over the world, even in very progressive countries, right? Like Canada and Australia, they all scream and cheer for Sean Strickland, right? They all go on him. So the core MMA fan is not a fan that is a fan of the message, right? This is high level, high testosterone, cage fighting. You look at the pop that the Republicans get when they walk out in crowds. Yeah, you hear the chants in the stadiums when they're at these countries like Canada, and you know exactly what side of the aisle the MMA fan is on. And that doesn't mean to say that there aren't MMA fans on both sides of the aisle. I'm just saying the general majority of MMA fans are clearly on one side of the aisle. And you can see that as well in the split that is happening on YouTube. You've got the corporate media, which numbers are dropping and dropping and dropping. And then you have this private YouTube creator media, this user-based driven media, and their numbers are just shooting through the roof. And this is what is happening. So when the UFC look at their moneymaker of Sean Strickland, they are either going to help promote him or they are going to kick him off to the sidelines. And it's all going to come down to where is his next spot on the placement of a card. If he is put in the apex, he is not a star, or the UFC is not trying to promote him. They do not put Khamzat Chimaev in the apex. They do not put Nate Diaz in the apex. They would not put Sean O'Malley on his rise up in the apex. They put them on co-main events in arenas, in stadiums. That's where their stars go. They build stars slowly in the apex, and then they test run stars on audiences. That's what they were doing with Mike Malott. That's what you can see they did with Ian Gary. They test run their stars in front of audiences on pay-per-views. And if they are going to promote Sean Strickland and keep him going, he is going to be in a proper number one contender shot. Not an easy, like it won't be a give me, but it'll be a proper number one contender shot, and it will be in a co-main event, or it will be headlining a stadium somewhere in America. It'll be headlining a stadium somewhere in the world. But if they shove him back in the apex and put him against a wrestler, you know which way the tides at the UFC are really turning behind the scenes. And Dana White is the last one that is holding the floodgates back between the fans and the full corporatization of the UFC. Because once Dana goes, all that stuff that's happened in the background, all of that action that's happened in the background that shows that yes, the UFC is going to be Disneyfied once Dana steps out, that is all just going to come rushing forward. And we'll know the UFC's true colors with Sean Strickland's next fight. So I'm excited for him to book it because I want to see what happens next. If you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button to say thank you. If you're still here, maybe I've given you something to think about, different angle to look at it. So the way that you could say thanks to me is by hitting that subscribe button. It means so much to small content creators like myself. And let me know your thoughts on the UFC's direction going forward in the next 5 years. Where do you see it lining up? Put that down there in the comments for me because I love reading everyone's little theories about where we're going to end up here as MMA fans. Thanks for watching this video. And of course, I'll see you all in the next one.